Hi, everyone. Welcome. Hi, Alison. Hi, Bobby. Hi, everyone, for joining us. We're going to go ahead and kick it off. And first of all, say welcome to Monday and welcome to the end of the holiday, but we'll have another one coming soon. And then for those that are celebrating Hanukkah, happy Hanukkah. But welcome to everyone to our latest People Plus Places conversation. Chili bowls, donuts, and hot dogs, saving big and bold places. And we're very excited to have you all here today and to talk about this subject matter, because I think certainly our guests here are lovers of this, as am I, but I know all of you are too. So we want to talk more about that. Let me start by introducing myself. I'm Adrian Scott Fine. I am the Senior Director of Advocacy for the Los Angeles Conservancy. And we're going to do a couple of things today. It's going to be inherently informal. That's what we're all about, but more about a conversation, talking about these kinds of places, in particular about roadside architecture and programmatic architecture, and specifically the Chili Bowl in West Los Angeles. And for those that love this weird and wild style of architecture, which is so unique to Los Angeles and its history, this issue is also particularly urgent, as there are so few examples of it left. It's very much a rarity at this point in time. And in fact, the Chili Bowl in West Los Angeles is one of the oldest surviving examples of this architectural style in Los Angeles. And so we know you have lots of questions. There are lots of questions about this building, why it's at risk, and what makes this issue and this type of architecture so important. So we're going to talk about that today. And with that, if you haven't noticed already, we have two special guests with us today to help do that and to help us have this conversation. First up, depending on what square it is on your screen, we have Bobby Green, who is the co-founder and creative designer of the 1933 Group, responsible for restoring and reimagining some of LA's most successful night spots, including West Hollywood's Formosa Cafe. He's also no stranger to programmatic architecture, having reimagined the barrel-shaped Idle Hour in North Hollywood, and currently working on bringing back the beloved Tell the Pup. We're all super excited. We cannot do this without Bobby and the rest of the partners at 1933 Group, so thank you for everything that you do. And our next guest, who also we couldn't do what we do without her, is Alison Martino, who is the founder of the highly popular channel Vintage Los Angeles, where you can find on both Instagram and Facebook, which is dedicated to LA's physical transformation during the 20th century, as well as its history as the center of the entertainment industry and community. She's also a journalist, a columnist, documentarian, and a proud lifelong Angelino. And if you're not following any of her channels, you are missing out, because there's amazing things that she's posting, feels like every hour, but every day. Really great stuff in terms of that. So we'll get into that conversation very shortly. But let me first bring you up to speed a little bit on the Chili Bowl, what's going on with that, and why we're all here today. And then we'll have more of a conversation in just a second. So let me quickly share my screen again. Okay. And here we are. And here we are here. So once upon a time, not too long ago, but a while back, a lot of Los Angeles looked like this idea of programmatic architecture, which is an architecture that is a building that is fashioned out of the shape of the business's product or its identity. It was a craze especially popular in the 20s, 30s, and 40s, and what coincided so well with the idea of LA's car culture and the idea that you're driving around and development's happening and you want to attract the attention of a passing motorist. Well, you design your building to look like the business or the product that you're selling. And it's so wild and interesting that hopefully that person will make a U-turn or turn over and spend some money. That was the basic idea, so that you could go to a Brown Derby and have a meal. So you could have a meal inside of a hat, or you could have a chili inside of a big chili bowl. Or, as you all know, and thankfully we still have today, the idea that you could buy a donut in a giant donut. So that was the basic idea. And the building that we're talking about today, in many ways, is the Chili Bowl and the Chili Bowl franchise. This was the brainchild of a man named Arthur Whizen. In 1931, when he was only 25, he opened his first chili bowl restaurant at 3012 Crenshaw Boulevard. And within a decade, Wizen opened 18 locations using his chili bowl design for each of the locations. The idea, again, come to a big giant chili bowl, have some chili, spend some money. And they were a huge success. And they flourished, certainly, although most of the branches closed after World War II. The building we're talking about today is this structure, what it looked like not too long ago and what it looks like today. So this is the Chili Bowl in West Los Angeles. It was originally located in Silver Lake, built in 1935. It was moved to its current location at 12244 West Pico Boulevard in 1939. And it's one of 5 remaining surviving former Chili Bowl structures. It's the most intact, in our opinion, of all of those structures today. It is also operated almost always continuously as an eatery, the most recent tenant being this Japanese restaurant, which opened around 2012, and we believe it closed recently during the pandemic. And the vast majority of LA's programmatic buildings and architecture have been torn down over the years, which part of the reason why we're so thankful of Bobby, who's intervened to save more than one. But the idea that we don't have the Brown Derby anymore, at least we don't have the majority of the Brown Derby that we once had, or we don't have the Zepp Diner, which looked like a big Zeppelin that you could, have a meal in, or the Toad Inn, and many more. So at this point, many of the programmatic architecture examples are, those that survive are extremely rare as a resource type. This structure, again, the Chili Bowl, was picked up by Survey L.A., the city's survey of historic places. It was identified as being eligible for a local designation at the national, state, and local levels in the Los Angeles citywide survey. And the idea where this all started in terms of being a preservation issue for the Los Angeles Conservancy is that we were concerned about its future, understanding the rarity of these resource types and understanding that development pressures would potentially put this building at risk. So on October 18th, 2019, we submitted an application to make this building a historic cultural monument. And that was the start of a process. By December of 2019, the city's Cultural Heritage Commission reviewed this and ultimately voted in support of this nomination. And that then kicked it to the city council. And that's where we had a long delay in terms of a process. So in part due to COVID, there was a long continuation with this issue before city council would hear it. And we were just kind of waiting it out, which brought us to around June of this year, not too long ago. That's when it was first heard by the city council and through the Planning and Land Use Management Committee. They heard the item, and that's when it kicked off a couple of different things. Notably, Councilman Mike Bonin came out in opposition to our nomination, which we certainly were disappointed in. However, the other aspect of that hearing on June 15th is the city council's Planning and Land Use Management Committee did not take our testimony, nor did they take any comments from the public. So that then led to us trying to correct that issue before it would be voted on by the full city council. However, that did not occur, and the city council ultimately voted this nomination down. In response, we filed a petition to have this address this issue. Essentially, it's a Brown Act violation. And for those that may not be aware of what that means, California has a state law called the Brown Act that requires public agencies to allow for public comment, public participation in matters like this, and that did not occur. So we filed a petition to ask the city to address this issue. And that's where we're at in many ways today. This will be coming back to the city council through the Planning and Land Use Management Committee. Initially, we were told it was coming back tomorrow. That changed at the end of last week, and now it will be coming to that committee, otherwise known as the Plum Committee, on December 7th. So we have basically a week before we will have essentially a redo, and the city council will have another opportunity to vote on this matter. So we're also very much encouraging Councilman Mike Bonin to change his position and support this nomination in terms of what we think could be achieved here. And that really brings us to the idea that we think it's readily possible to have a win-win opportunity with the Chili Bowl, as we've had with so many other historic places throughout Los Angeles. There's also some history that with this in terms of other places. On the left here, you see the Baptist Church of Venice, the First Baptist Church of Venice. This is another nomination that initially did not have the support of Councilman Mike Bonin. However, through a lot of pressure and certainly support from the community, he changed his mind. And this is now a designated historic cultural monument, very important in terms of African-American heritage to Los Angeles and the Venice community. And we're hoping the same can be achieved with the Chili Bowl. It's also this idea that we often hear from developers that say they cannot possibly keep an old building while adding new construction. And we ask, well, why not? Especially for small historic buildings, especially for those that are located on the edge of a site. Why can't we find a way, and essentially what we are always pressing for, the win-win, in which we can achieve new construction, density, housing, all laudable things that we want to achieve in this city, but not necessarily at the needless expense of our heritage. And so we often press, well, why can't we do both? Why is it an either or when it can be a both and? And so there are examples of this where other communities have done this, or other places throughout Los Angeles. And one of those we certainly would point to is the Quonset hut in Santa Monica, where they added a lot of needed housing, but again, maintained this very small, simple little building, very similar to kind of Chili Bowl in terms of a simple structure, but they were able to do both. And so again, this is the ultimate win-win that we'd like to achieve with this particular instance here. But we'll have more time to talk more about that and what we're doing and where things are leading up in the next week. Before we get to that, I want to share a quick little piece. It's a really great piece that Alison did for Spectrum News. It talks about programmatic architecture. She did this in 2019. So we're going to share that. It's about a 2-minute clip, and then we'll get into more of the conversation with Alison and Bobby. So just 1 second. Let me share that, bring that up. So just 1 second. Okay.
The city of Los Angeles has long been a cultural trendsetter in a variety of areas, including novelty buildings known as programmatic architecture. The structures and signs designed to grab the attention of motorists as they drove by. Today, the massive 1953 Randy's Donuts rooftop donut in Inglewood still can be easily seen from nearby freeways and streets. There was the Bulldog Cafe keeping watch on Washington Boulevard in Culver City for 3 decades. In Hollywood, you could buy a dozen roses in a flower pot or order a tamale to go inside a huge tamale. For an ice cream cone, stop at the Hoot Owl Cafe. And of course, many remember the most famous LA hot dog stand of them all, Tail o' the Pup. But thanks to the efforts of developer Bobby Green of the 1933 Group, some of these beloved roadside attractions are making a comeback.
So I remember being a kid and I would drive by, or my parents would drive me by this building, and it's just a weird looking building. At that time, it was painted white. It had awnings. Like, you couldn't tell it was really a barrel. It just looked like an odd shaped building. And I remember driving by it every year growing up in LA, for 20 something years. And it never changed. It was always just kind of falling apart.
And it was falling apart until 2015, when Bobby took it over and refurbished the Idle Hour bar and restaurant to its original 1941 splendor.
So Idle Hour is a giant whiskey barrel. And I was told that at one time there was about 12 barrel buildings in Los Angeles alone, and many more around the city. And then, of course, the Bulldog Cafe.
So this Bulldog is actually an example of programmatic architecture, which is very, very popular in the 1930s and 40s. They were roadside eateries. This Bulldog was actually taken from the Peterson Museum and now preserved here at the Idle Hour. So at this one location on Vineland Avenue in North Hollywood, you can see 2 of the last remaining examples of this type of novelty architecture that was so popular in LA for decades.
Okay, Alison, Bobby, welcome, officially welcome. I'm going to start with you, Alison. First of all, I love that piece. And I love all the reporting and all the things that you do, because you really do keep the history alive, and you remind us of what LA was, but also what LA can be. And that's part of this. It's not about freezing LA in amber. It's the idea that we can evolve, we can change, but we don't have to lose these places that we love. So tell us a little bit about why you love roadside architecture and what these places mean to you. And you're muted, so if you can unmute. Oops. Now we lost your screen. Now you're back.
Unmute.
Okay, we can hear you.
Okay. So anyway, I wanted to say I'm very lucky that Spectrum News also is very supportive of talking about older LA and really digging deep, and they see the future of saving buildings as well. So I'm lucky to have that. I started Vintage LA 12 years ago, never thinking anybody would. Maybe I thought I'd have 100 people join and we would just go back and forth and talk about old LA. But I didn't realize 11 years later, it became a community and voices for people. Watching that piece, which I love too, was really fun, going back and going through the donut hole with the cameras. And, I think about, this was so pre-everything, pre-digital, pre-computers. There was no digital billboards to promote a business. That I thought they must have just, well, let's get creative. We'll make a teapot if you want to get coffee. We'll make, an idle hour, you kind of have a barrel. But looking back, the donut makes perfect sense. Donuts, donut hole, right? So the creativity of that, it must have been glorious to see that back in the day, and just drive down random streets and seeing what, kooky architecture you were going to see on the roadside, right?
Right. No, absolutely.
Yeah. So I think that, that the pieces like that are important to for people to see. Thank you for playing it, because I think a lot of people are not aware of what that architecture was back then.
No, absolutely. I think that's part of the issue here, is that LA, and Bobby and I were talking about this earlier, a little this afternoon, that LA is always changing and changing so quickly that it's easy to forget about these places, because some of them only lasted a very short period of time before they were lost. And some, development pressure is the way it works in a city like LA. So when we do have something like the Chili Bowl or the tamale or whatever it is that is still surviving, not only is that amazing that it's still here, despite all of the pressures and the way LA moves. So that's another reason that we should be working as hard as we possibly can to save them. Exactly. And speaking of that, Bobby, you have saved more programmatic architecture than certainly any of us.
And yes, I'm very fortunate that happened that way. And I grew up in Los Angeles, and I'm also a car guy. A lot of people know that. And, Los Angeles is the only city in America that was designed around the automobile. It's why our city is a gigantic grid. It's very easy to drive. And programmatic architecture, as we all know, started because of the automobile, catching the eye of attention of the motorists. And in a city like Los Angeles, which we have many, many, unique things to talk about and share history with, but programmatic architecture is one that is almost forgotten, and it's one of the most colorful. I look at these structures somewhat as mascots of a neighborhood, and if you mention Inglewood to somebody, probably the image that pops up is going to be the giant donut. If you mention Hollywood Boulevard, the image is going to be the Man Chinese Theater. Neighborhoods have mascots. And, when you live in a city and you live in an environment that is constantly changing around you, it does not do well for psychology. It disrupts the foundation of your life. And that's something that when I dig a little deeper about neighborhoods, I talk about the drivescape of Los Angeles. And the drivescape is what we see every day, because we see life through the windshield of a car or a bus. And we have, you grow up that way. And so to us, LA is like this. The ground story of any building is something we see daily. And if that was to change constantly throughout our life, it's gonna leave us very ungrounded and cause some issues. But if every city could have a mascot, that mascot could ground us and make us feel like we are in the same neighborhood. We wouldn't get lost in our own neighborhood if we had a mascot to look for. And I also, the other thing I always press upon people with this type of architecture is it's exciting and it's something that people want to talk about. And it also brings generations together. It brings the young and the old together. A 13-year-old could say, hey, this place that's shaped like a bowl is a new hot breakfast cereal joint. And I'm going to go check it out. And, and the grandmother would say, when I was your age, we used to get chili there. And they have something in connection with each other. They have something to talk about. So we can talk about purely architecture, but I think it goes much deeper than that.
Yeah, I agree. I love mascots, architectural mascots of our cities, and I love the idea of drivescapes, or thinking about it from that perspective, because that is how you experience Los Angeles. It's where you're driving by, and these places, again, were intended to draw your attention, make you look at them and want to go and explore them. And the other thing is they're just fun. There's nothing more fun than seeing a giant bulldog or a big, Zeppelin or whatever it was. They were intended to be fun. And so, and speaking of fun, Bobby, can you tell us a little bit about your latest adventure with the programmatic architecture and the Tail of the Pup that we're all very, very excited to be able to visit very soon again?
Yes, the Tail of the Pup. I know Alison has some deep history with Tail of the Pup. She's done a lot herself to get the hot dog to this point. The giant hot dog that we all grew up seeing on La Cienega Boulevard, and then moved to San Vicente. It was probably next to the Chili Bowl. It was probably one of the oldest, longest thriving programmatic architecture businesses in LA. And luckily, I think thanks to Alison and thanks to the family, they realized that when the owners passed away, that the kids needed to save the building, put it in storage, not just tear it down. And luckily they did. And so after many years, it's luckily fallen in my hands and my partners, the 1933 group. So we will be bringing it back. We're in construction now on a new location, working out all the little details. So look for that early next year.
Woohoo!
Yeah.
All right.
We can't wait. I'm not a big hot dog fan, but I will be again, especially going to a giant hot dog. I'm not a native, so I want to see this, experience it. But as a native, Alison, can you share a little bit some of your personal memories? And that's part of what I like so much about the way you curate LA and tell its story. You tell your story and your family's story, and those of you who don't know, Alison's dad, Al Martino, but that's part of what makes it so special, but also your work to help, save and intervene with the Tail of the Pup.
Well, mascots of the neighborhood, that was probably my mascot because Tail of the Pup was located La Cienega, and right by the Beverly Center, Beverly and La Cienega, where Kittyland was, where Beverly Park was. I mean, imagine a huge carnival Ferris wheel and an amusement park where the Beverly Center is now. And that was really, really popular in the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s. I got the tail end of it, thank God. And my parents would take me there and we would go across and get a hot dog at Tail of the Pup. So it felt like there was a lot to do in that Four Corners right there. And I used to take dance lessons at the Al Gilbert's, right next door. So my whole life going there, I remember seeing LA Story for the first time, and that opening where the Tail of the Pup is just flying in the air. And it's when I realized it's an icon, that structure. It was on dozens of postcards when I was growing up. And I always thought, and then when it moved, we followed it there and we just thought it would always be around. And then of course it was gone forever. And I went down to find the family and we did get to see it in storage. And it's gone through so much journey that we'll be talking about later, but you know, as the Tail of the Pup reopens, it's in the right hands, as we know, and it's going back to West Hollywood, right, Bobby? Am I blowing the surprise?
Yeah, that's right, West Hollywood.
Yeah, I mean, and it's like, I'm really happy because it's a block from my house. So
Perfect.
I couldn't be happier about it. And it's so good for the city of West Hollywood to see an icon come back when
Well,
we're
you know,
losing so much.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because that brings up something I wanted to talk about. How important it is for a city to get involved with its mascots.
Yeah.
News came out, it's been probably a year and a half or 2 years now, that we had acquired the Tail of the Pup. I was shocked to get an email from the mayor and the head of planning of West Hollywood. And they said, we just saw the news. We would love to come meet with you because we would love to help you however we can bring the hot dog back to our city. And that to me was just shocking, because I you know, as a business person trying to do business in LA for 30 years, I've hit nothing but opposition from city in one way or another. And the fact that a city is progressive enough to realize how important these mascots can be for the identity of a city, for the financial influx of a city, for tourism, is so refreshing to see. And so we met, we had a wonderful conversation. And just because of that conversation, I was steadfast about waiting to find the perfect location in West Hollywood. So kudos to them.
Yes.
Yeah, it doesn't always happen that way. And that's certainly, we would love to see a similar kind of outcome and success story for the Chili Bowl. And I think, Alison, you said it best, is that, you know, when these things are, you know, we lose them, they're gone forever. So yeah, we have the most intact example of the Chili Bowl in West Pico. And we would love to see it there, stay there, reopen as some kind of restaurant. And part of the idea is that they can be reincarnated into new, it doesn't have to sell chili. We don't care. It's the idea that you can go to this kind of really wonderful space that looked like a chili bowl, but maybe you're going there for Japanese, or you're going there for Italian, whatever. That makes it even more interesting that these buildings are incredibly adaptable for new functions, and we can build around them in terms of that. A couple of people have asked, I know, in the chat here, and it's also come up in previous conversations, and it certainly seems relevant to bring up in terms of the kind of context of the Tail of the Pup, is why can't you just move it? You can move the Chili Bowl, but we still need a place to take it. And just so that everyone's aware, there were conversations with the owners of the Chili Bowl about moving it. As far as we're aware, and we've been pretty clear on terms of the process, there is no serious consideration of moving the Chili Bowl at this moment. So, which really speaks to why we're pressing so hard to have it made and declared a historic cultural monument, to give it a process that maybe in the future there is a place to move it, but at least this would afford it some protection and a design review process while we're waiting for that. Or better yet, it stays where it is, and there's a successful way to blend the new and the old with this building. But right now, if we don't achieve the historic cultural monument designation, we're very, you know, it's very likely that we will lose the Chili Bowl. There won't be any way to protect it in terms of that. So that's the big part of this in terms of, you know, where we're at, what we're doing. And it really does go back to this idea of everyone reaching out to Councilman Mike at this point, pressing upon him to change his mind. We all have a difference of opinion, or we look at things differently in a new light. And that's what we would certainly hope that happens with this particular case, and looking for a more positive outcome in terms of the Chili Bowl. So with that, I don't know, Bobby, Alison, anything I haven't asked you about, or something else you want to share about programmatic architecture at the Chili Bowl, or anything that we should be talking about?
I just want to thank Bobby for providing a balance back in this town again. There just hasn't been much of a balance. It's just all these brand new buildings and new developments. And like Bobby said, I get lost on certain corners that I knew my whole life that I don't recognize anymore. And thanks to Bobby, we have the Formosa and we have the Idol. I mean, we have places I remember as a child, and I know where I'm at. And so to see the Tail of the Pup come back is so exciting to me, because I really believe it will show the neighborhood and all kinds of neighborhoods, that we can not only, maybe we can bring something back, even if it had been out of business for a decade. And so thank you, Bobby.
Well,
thank you.
We're all in this together. And you know, it's great to see the outpouring of support, especially for the hot dog, the tail of the pup, because it's still fresh in people's minds. The idle hour, not so much. It was shuttered for 35 years. But the Formosa, yes, 100%. And tail of the pup, a huge support for that. And, you know, I'm fortunate that I feel that I found at least a small way to combine commerce with preservation and find a way to keep these businesses alive financially, even if they don't do nearly as well as they would do if I opened a new fancy nightclub somewhere. But it doesn't matter because you're saving something important, and it does bring balance. Our city is being changed so fast. We're putting up these boxy condos that are going to be so dated, you know, in a matter of about 8 years.
Yep.
And then they'll just tear more down and build them again. So we do need that balance. And Adrian, I'm glad you brought up the option of moving, because, you know, the Chili Bowl did move once before. Best case scenario, obviously, would be to landmark it and keep it in place and find a person like myself to bring it back to life. But then again, so, you know, it's moving it would still be better than tearing it down. And like you said, absolutely, it needs a place. It would need a place to move to. So we're dealing with two different issues here. But at least I think if we attack it all together at the same time and just make it apparently clear that it's important this place is saved one way or the other, then I think the outcome will be what we all wish for.
Yeah, absolutely. We're not opposed to moving it. It's always kind of a last resort, but you're right. There's some history here. And there's history with these kinds of buildings. They were small buildings. They're relatively lightweight buildings. So it's not that hard to move these structures, but you still have to find a place to move it to. And in a place like LA, where the real estate, every inch of the real estate is worth so much, it's not easy to find that new place. So that really does speak to the idea of why we wanted to at least have it protected, and that in the future, if there is a plan that comes together to move it, that can be accomplished, even if it's designated as an historic cultural monument. It doesn't preclude that from happening by any means. We have a couple of questions I'll just like to throw out to the group here, if you're open for that. This isn't programmatic, but it is sort of a long-standing legacy business and location. But someone was asking about, is the Pig and the Whistle gone for good? I know, Alison, you have done a lot of reporting on this, but we kind of know where it's at, but we can talk a little bit about that. But I don't know if you want to share a little bit on Pig and the Whistle. And
I have not had the courage to drive by it. I've only seen pictures that a lot of people have submitted to me, but from what I've seen, it's destroyed inside. You know, it doesn't resemble anything that it once was. I know esoteric tours know a lot going on, because I think hopefully the facade isn't completely destroyed. It's just covered up. So hopefully one day I can go back. But it was shocking to see that transformation that is so not what it was, and very disappointing.
Right. And for those of you who don't know, Pig and the Whistle, was a long-standing restaurant that has a long Hollywood connection to on Hollywood Boulevard, and it's not designated as an historic cultural monument, sadly. Right. So it did not have the protection. It's within the National Register Historic District, but that's not the same. So permits have been, well, it didn't have permits, was part of the issue. So that's being looked at, but I think, as Alison said, a lot of the damage has already occurred. Yeah. And it's a question of what can be peeled back and protect what's remaining. So it does speak to this issue of the need to designate and protect these precious places that still are here.
I mean, to think that the Brown Derby is sitting on top of a strip mall in its original location is flabbergasting to me. And I don't think a lot of people don't realize that it's up there on the second floor of a strip mall. it can come back, Bobby. He's got his hands full.
Trust me. No. Trust me. That would be number one on my list. It's on the list of things. It's on the bucket list.
Oh man,
that
would be yeah.
Right. I saw that someone had asked this question, and Adrian, you can probably answer this one. But someone asked, does the city offer funding? Does the city offer help for saving things like this? The short answer right now is absolutely not. They don't have any resource to give for someone like myself who wanted to save a building. But Adrian, I think you had mentioned there may be some light in the future for that.
Yeah, a couple of things. I mean, the city does have a Mills Act program, and a number of each city can opt into offering this program, which is if you're accepted and it's declared, you can get a property tax reduction, which, depending on where you're at and, how long you've owned the property, it can be a significant incentive. So that is one thing that's available for designated landmarks. It depends on, process. So it's not a guarantee, but it's a possibility. Another thing that we're working very closely, and we're not there yet, but especially for our legacy businesses across, LA County, but specifically within the city of Los Angeles, we're very hopeful that the city will be putting forward a proposal soon for establishing an official legacy business program.
Good.
We're not there yet, but we're fingers crossed that soon that will be coming forward, and that would be a kind of a really exciting moment to, one, provide some promotion for these legacy businesses and to give them the kudos and thanks that they are so well deserving of, but also hopefully to have some financial incentives to help them, because certainly during the pandemic they've struggled mightily to stay afloat. And again, thank you, Bobby and the 1933 group, for not closing your doors during, I can only imagine, has been a really tough time. And that goes to say for so many of these businesses that were able to survive during this period of time. So for sure. Another question, and I can answer this, is just who is the current owner of the bowl, of the Chili Bowl? It's owned privately. We don't know specifically. I believe it's an LLC in terms of that. What we do know is the proposal is to build housing at that site, which we're not opposed to. And I think, as you all know, we need housing in Los Angeles. We're just pressing that, why can't we build housing to incorporate and to celebrate the Chili Bowl as part of the design and the attraction, and really make it something you can celebrate. And again, work off what Bobby's group has done so well is they are using these places as part of the marketing to really draw attention and make people want to be there and come. And that's the same that could occur with the Chili Bowl, is to celebrate what you have rather than try to get rid of it.
Adrian, I'm glad you did show the small Quonset hut in Santa Monica. And all these businesses and these buildings, they tell stories. The Quonset hut tells a story of the aerospace industry that we had here in Los Angeles, and is a relic of that. And I've been to the lot on Pico. As far as I know, that the property owner owns the welding shop in the back. He also owns the liquor store and an adult bookstore across a very small little dead-end street there. So there's a lot of room to create housing. There's a lot of room to create new retail, new housing that can go up. It would be similar to what you showed with the Quonset hut. It could easily be left in place, and a lot of housing could go behind it and next door to it. Yeah, which would be great for the business, to be honest with you. So, as much of a lover of history and preservation as I am, I'm also an entrepreneur. So I understand that progress needs to happen, will happen. Housing needs to happen, but there's a lot of ways that we can find the balance in both.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. The balance in both and the win-win, we think, is readily achievable. And so it goes to the last question that I see here. It's about asking about Councilman Mike Bonin, and it really does go to what we all need to focus in on in this next week before this goes to City Council again on December 7th. Is he does hold the card in many ways of whether or not this becomes a designated historic cultural monument. It's the council person in their district that really makes the decision. If they're not supporting it, it's very unlikely for the rest of the city council to support. That's just the way it works in a place like Los Angeles and many other cities. They really defer to the councilman in which the property is located within their district. So that's why we need to encourage you all to reach out to Mike. Ask him to change his opinion, ask him that, circumstances have changed, so there really is no plan to move the Chili Bowl anywhere else, so that if we don't achieve the designation, we're likely to lose it. We hope that's not the case. We hope the owners and everyone change their mind and, have a turnaround here, but right now we're not seeing that. It doesn't seem likely. So we encourage you all to go to our website, laconservancy.org. You can find all the information you need to in terms of reaching out to Councilman Mike Bonin. I think Carly in our office hopefully will put the link into the chat box here so you can find it and make it easy. Share it with your friends. If you live in his district, even better. If you know Mike and he's your friend, give him a call. Ask him to reconsider his position on this. Certainly, we really need it. Any last parting thoughts, Allison, Bobby, that you want to share with the group here?
Can't we just send him this Zoom conversation?
I think we probably can.
I think that would be a good idea. Why not?
Yeah.
I'll ask you a question. There's some famous photographs shot by Rocky Shank of the Formosa Cafe. And the Formosa Cafe was under threat a couple times in its life of being demolished. And people actually came out and picketed. They crowded the sidewalks, they made signs, they actually stood there, and they got the news to come by, and they got the news to take photos and film it. I have really not seen that kind of activism happen as much as it seemed like it did with saving the Formosa. Is that something do you feel would be a viable, thing to try, Adrian and
Yeah, well, it's like do whatever it takes. We don't see it as much as we once did in the preservation field. I think there's more relying on social media to try to do the kind of crowdsourcing, but there is nothing more powerful than a group of people, and now we can actually come together as people again in a place and to put yourself forward and the place you care about by going there and making a stink and making attention, getting some attention for it. So certainly that's possible. I think we've got a week to make a case, as we've been doing through this whole process to convince Councilman Bonin that, there's a way to both get the housing, but also through preservation as well. So, but yeah, I think it's possible. Great. Allison, do you have anything you want to share?
I just want to thank you so much for this extensive update, because I wasn't quite aware myself, even the landmarking process and how difficult it is, and to stay on top of it. And for everyone that's viewing this, to get the information on how they can get involved, because I think a lot of people do want to get involved online. At least my Vintage L.A. people do, that they come on, how do we get involved? So thank you for that. And I'll share this on Vintage L.A. and the word has to be spread, right? You have a week. So maybe we'll have to get down there. Have to go down there,
Maybe so.
I would do it. I would go
for it. So we've got a commitment of the three of us. So we need a few more friends and show up at the Chili Bowl. So, okay, here's what you need to do. Go to our website, find the details. Carly shared it in the chat. We will be sharing the Zoom with friends and people all over, but please reach out to Councilman Mike Bonin between now and December 7th. Also, if you're available, please join the City Council's Planning and Land Use Management Committee meeting. It will be on December 7th. It will start at 2. We don't know where we're on the agenda yet. It hasn't been released, but we know we'll be on the agenda. Please speak up at the hearing as well. Yeah. But again, we've got a week to make a difference. And we've had lots of people that have been sharing emails. We know people are reaching out to Mike's office, and keep it up, increase it. And maybe we'll also have a little, show up at the site as well to make some attention and get some more media attention for this. Right. But again, thank you all. We really appreciate it. Thank you for joining us today. And especially thank you, Allison. Thank you, Bobby, for everything you do for LA's history and vintage Los Angeles and programmatic architecture. And we all can't wait to buy a hot dog at Tail of the Pop really soon. And hopefully maybe we can do a chili hot dog at the Chili Bowl.
Of course.
I like that. Again, thank you all for joining us today, and we appreciate it. And thank you for all the members and supporters of the Los Angeles Conservancy. So
Thank you, Adrian.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Allison.
Thank you, Bobby.
bye.
Bye.